1. York, capital of the Danelaw. Her name was Zara Beth. She was the stepdaughter of the Dane Olaf the Vain, a rich fur merchant of York, or York, as the local Anglo-Saxons called it. She wasn't the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. His slave Syra was more enticing, more magnificently endowed than this woman. Unlike most men and women from his homeland, indeed unlike many people here in the Danelaw, she didn't have hair so blonde it was almost white in the noonday sun. No, her hair was blazing red, a stark, vivid red, a red dark as blood when there was no sun to lighten it. She wore it tumbling down her back in loose waves and curls, or when the day grew hot, in two thick braids wound together atop her head. That hair, he thought, had to be the result of a mother from that western island called Ireland. He'd visited the garrison in Dublin several years earlier to buy slaves and trade sea ivory, furs, antlers, and soapstone bowls and ornaments. He'd been told that the Irish bred like dogs, and this bold, rich colouring was many times the result. Her eyes were also an odd colour, a strange green, a hue he hadn't noticed in Ireland, a green that reminded him of wet moss. He had but to look at himself in a polished silver plate to know that his eyes, like those of most of his countrymen, were a sky blue when his mood was even, a blue as deep as the Oslo fjord when he was angry. His mother Helgi had told him, much to his embarrassment, that the blue of his eyes was soft and warm as a robin's egg. Zara Beth was tall, perhaps too tall for a woman, but he was a big man, and he still had half a foot above the top of her head, so he didn't care a bit. His first wife Darla had been small, the top of her head reaching only his shoulder, and he'd felt many times holding her that she was a child, not a woman, not a wife. He had managed to come close to Zara Beth for a few moments, and had seen that her flesh was white and unblemished as a patch of fresh mountain snow, save for those two dimples that deepened in her cheeks when she smiled, a smile that drew him the moment he saw it. Aye, he thought, not at all dissuaded she wasn't from his Viking stock, so again, he didn't care a bit. No, she wasn't the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, but he wanted her more than he'd ever before wanted a woman. He thought of bedding her, of coming deep into her woman's body and coming to his release, but he also thought of talking to her and sharing his dreams and plans with her. He thought of sailing with her to Hedeby, that south trading port that lay on an inlet of the river Schlei, and gave directly on to the Baltic, and beyond Hedeby, through the small islands, lay the rough-bottomed toe of Sweden but 2 days' sailing away. He thought of sailing through the Great Sound, but opened south into the Baltic Sea, and turning inland into the penetrating river Dvina, that led to the upper Dnieper and Kiev. Perhaps he could even take her beyond Kiev, to that golden city on the Black Sea known to the Vikings as Miklagard, and to the others as Constantinople. And then, just as suddenly, with just as much clarity, he thought of children with her, of girls with bright red hair, and boys with his own thick blonde hair. Odd, but he envisioned a boy with eyes as green as wet moss. He, Magnus Haraldsson, was a 25-year-old Carl, the second son of Earl Harold. He held a farmstead called Malek, passed on to him by his grandfather. The soil was rich, unlike much of the craggy, unarable land in southern Norway, and yielded good crops of barley, wheat, and rye. Magnus was also a trader, occasionally a sharp-witted one, his father told him fondly, and he owned his own vessel, the Sea Wind. He also owned a dozen slaves as of his last trip, and many jarls now worked for him in return for small parcels of land to raise food for their families. Many of these jarls were his friends, and they not only sailed with him to trading centres, but brought their goods to sell as well. Magnus had been married at the age of 17, a marriage arranged by his parents, and he had a son, Egil, who was now nearly 8 years old. His wife, Darla, scarcely more than a child herself, had died 2 years after the boy's birth. He had mourned her as he might have a lost playmate, and over the years, as he had grown older and taken his pleasure with many different women, decided that he had no need of another wife or of more children. He had come to look upon married men as weak-willed and